It's always curious what shows from across the pond make their way over into the pop cultural American zeitgeist. Shows like Doctor Who, Black Mirror, Sherlock, and Fleabag have found their way into the hearts of many Americans despite their British roots. But then you got shows like The Office that just never really worked until it was more Americanized. Also game shows. None of these British game shows have really caught on over here, except maybe Taskmaster, and that's more so thanks to the likes of YouTube Shorts and not so much the American rendition because I don't know what that was. All of this to say that unfortunately Inside Number 9 has never really caught on in America, which is a great travesty because this has become one of my favorite shows of all time.
Whoa, even above X-Files?
Well, okay, hold on now. Let's not go crazy with it. But it is for sure a top 10, if not even a top 5 show for me now. And if you continue watching, you'll soon find out why. So, how was that?
It's okay. I just think cold opens need to end on a comedic note. Like, we can make fun of beans on toast and then go into the intro.
Oh, well, I actually like beans on toast.
What the fuck?
Inside Number 9 is an anthology-based television series that isn't horror per se, but is horror adjacent. If anything, this show is a dark comedy. A genre of comedy I think blends perfectly with the more dry, witty, awkward British sense of humor. Each episode plays out like a short play or a bottle episode, meaning that every episode takes place in one location, and we don't get to see anything outside of that central location. Sort of. Yeah, it's not a set-in-stone rule. They can get loose with it if need be, but a majority do follow this principle. Cool, right? But what's with the name? Why Inside Number 9? Well, that's because every single episode is significantly linked to the number 9 in some fashion. A majority of the time, it's just a location, you know, house number 9, apartment number 9, train coach number 9, and so on and so on. But occasionally, the show does venture out, like an episode where a size 9 shoe plays a significant role within the story, or an episode about a television writer who created a show called The Ninth Circle. I personally wish there were more episodes like that because, once again, more often than not, it is just the number assigned to the setting, but hey, I'm not losing sleep over it. Inside Number 9 ran on the BBC from 2014 to 2024, ironically, or poetically, spanning 9 seasons in total, or since this is a British show, 9 series in total.
Whoa, 9 seasons? We're covering a lot of episodes in this video, huh?
Kind of. This is British television we're talking here, so each season only contains 6 episodes. I read somewhere that shows in the UK have less episodes per season because they just have less writers on staff than here in America. Case in point, every single episode in Inside Number 9 is solely written by its 2 creators, Steve Pemberton and Reese Shearsmith, who have been longtime creative partners, creating, writing, and acting in their previous work, The League of Gentlemen and Psychoville. And you best believe they keep this tradition alive here. Pemberton and Shearsmith act in every single episode in this series, except for one, but there's a good reason why, and I can't wait to talk about that one. Now, if these names or shows completely elude you, I understand. I'm in a similar boat. Once again, like I said at the start, some things just stay across the pond. So I would just want to formally apologize now. This show is loaded with British actors and actresses that I just don't know. So to all my UK fans, if I don't properly point out a certain celebrity, just blame it on my American ignorance and my face blindness. It's been a problem my whole life. I recognize people more by their voice than their appearance, if anyone was curious. Me being a hot dog eating Yank also means there are certain cultural things pertaining to the British way of living that I'm just not all too privy to. However, I do know the basics because I am half British.
Ugh, what the fuck?
I know, but my dad was born and raised in England, so when I was growing up as a kid, I had my fair share of beans on toast and Sunday roast with Yorkshire puddings and more than enough tea and even more than enough digestive biscuits. That being said, outside of like 2 episodes, I don't think there's anything that's going to alienate the American audience. A very surface level understanding of British culture is enough to get you by. Really, the only trip-ups are going to be vernacular more than anything. You know, rubbish means trash, chips or fries, a jumper is a sweater? What the fuck? But it's still English in the end of the day, so if you're an English speaker, simple context clues can fill you into what certain words mean. And just for clarification, the 2018 Halloween special, titled Deadline, will not be a part of this ranking. I've seen it and I love it. So much so that I want to do an individual video on that in the future. There's so much to talk about there. Plus, it's not technically a part of any season. It's just a standalone special, kind of like the webisode that just so happened to come out on my 14th birthday. It's always just a fun little coincidence when things happen to come out on your birthday. I mean, if this video came out on your birthday, then hey, happy birthday. And I didn't know how to work this into the intro, but in every single episode of Inside Number 9, there is a hidden brass hair statue. It's a fun little Easter egg, kind of like the snail in Adventure Time. It serves no plot significance, except for a fun little thing to keep an eye out for. Well, actually, there's one episode where this statue is significant to the plot. Actually, same goes for the snail in Adventure Time as well. Huh, what a funny coincidence. I actually tried to get a brass hair statue for this video as like set decoration, but I couldn't find one that was accurate enough or cheap enough. So at least we can put it into the thumbnail of this video. Anyways, I've kept you guys waiting long enough. So please sit back and relax as I rank every single episode of Inside Number 9 from worst to best. Enjoy. Now, in a series filled with great episodes, it may seem difficult to pick the worst episode, and, well, that's not really the case here. Wuthering Heights, to me, sticks out like a sore thumb. Nothing really works here for me personally. This episode follows a group of people planning a heist, and in that regard, this episode is essentially split into 2 halves, with the first half being the planning stages, and the second half seeing the group reconvening after said heist, with, of course, everything going wrong due to a series of double crosses and misunderstandings. If any of this rings familiar to you, that's because this whole episode is kind of one big homage to Reservoir Dogs, which may have boded well if it wasn't for this episode's presentation style, or rather, gimmick. You see, this whole episode is performed in the style called Italian comedy, which was an early form of professional theater. What this amounts to ultimately, however, is a bunch of characters breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the camera. And I love a good cheeky fourth wall break, but this just doesn't work for me because the comedy just doesn't work for me. And this really isn't a case of me not getting British humor. I mean, as this ranking goes on, you'll soon find out how much I love British humor. It's more so a case of this stuff just not being funny. I understand that humor is subjective, but at the same time, I know what the show is capable of. And in this scenario, everything just feels slow and stilted. It's not as snappy or as witty as it typically is, and there's an overabundance of lowbrow humor.
Are we talking about the episode or your YouTube videos?
Oh, God. That one actually stung a bit. If the humor doesn't work, does the story? Well, yeah. The overall story here is solid enough, but the problem is that the humor is so intertwined within the story, it's hard to properly separate the two. And this is the only episode in the entire series where I felt like it was a genuine slog to get through. This one is disappointing, to say the least. It feels surprisingly surface level for an Inside Number 9 episode, too. This show is pretty infamous for taking a bunch of characters, sticking them in a room, and having all their stories collide into one big, glorious mess. You'll see that soon enough, but just not here. Because this episode felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it just never does. What you see with these characters is what you get. Their interpersonal relationships and connections with each other never change. Things felt so stagnant, I was left waiting for the classic Inside Number 9 bombshell to be dropped and radically change things, but it never happened.
Nah, I'm pretty sure bombshells are still dropped in London.
Whoa, can we joke about that?
I mean, you're half British.
Yeah, I'm half British, you're half Japanese.
Nani?
I think if there's any silver lining, it's that this episode's premise is a fun gateway for some witty commentary, as it centers around a panel of judges from a variety of different backgrounds, trying to decide who should win the Best Actress award. It really highlights how arbitrary this whole process is and how personal biases and just other factors get in the way. Points of contention within the group range from not wanting to give it to this one actress because she's won too many times already, or another actress because she's too young, and that sort of praise might mess her up in the future. The actual acting abilities of these candidates factor very little into their actual voting process. Once again, it's fun, if not lacking the kind of depth I've come to expect from this series. The ending is cute though. This one judge actually was one of the candidates in disguise, who infiltrated the panel as a civilian by winning some sort of contest. And throughout the events of this episode, she was actually able to persuade the judges into voting for her. So, ironically, in the end, it was her ability to act that secured her win. It's not the typical holy shit twist ending this series is known for. In fact, you can kinda see it coming from a mile away, but it still lands for me, nonetheless. This is one of the episodes I kinda alluded to in the intro. This story might have the largest cultural barrier to us Americans. I mean, what the fuck's a Brexit?
It's the withdrawal process of the UK from the EU.
No. Wait, I'm supposed to be the smart one. That being said, the show presents everything rather blatantly and in a over-exaggerated manner. So even if you don't have any insight into the UK's political climate, you'll be able to piece together things fine enough. Besides, the subject matter on display here could really be applied to anything within the Western world, as this episode touches on xenophobia in a general sense, along with the nature of patriotism and the rise of nationalism. However, it's a bit of an imbalance. Not all subject matters are equally explored, making some feel like half-baked ideas at best. This is really apparent once Jesus Christ enters the picture. That's right. Just like in Steel Ball Run, Jesus Christ is an important character within the narrative. I'm sorry, it's state mandated to have at least one JoJo's reference per ranking video at this point. Listen, undoubtedly there's a lot to dissect here. Like how in the end when they kill Jesus and wrap him up in the Union Jack flag, which I read as the notion of literally being so wrapped up within nationalism that these people can't even acknowledge British history, with the blood and violence being covered by patriotic symbol. And that's really just scratching the surface here. Once again, this episode does go over Brexit, showcasing the hypocrisy on both the Leavers and the Remainers, which, completely escapes me. I try to keep up as much as I could, but once again, there is still that barrier. Undoubtedly, this episode probably resonates significantly better for the UK audiences than us dumb Yanks. But even then, I think this is an overstuffed episode that tries to tackle a lot of different subject matters, and because of that, I think the water gets a little muddy here. I don't hate this episode by any means. I just don't particularly like it either. This episode has a bad case of second verse, same as the first. Meaning, if you watch the first half of the episode, you practically watch the second half. It's a cool concept, and the execution can be a little fun at times, but I just feel like it's missing something. You see, in the first half we follow Kat as she tries to solve a case. However, her sense of time is all out of whack. Months pass without her knowing. Characters seemingly pop in and out of her life without her knowledge. And worst of all, she doesn't seem to know anything about her own life, or more specifically, her daughter. Well, as it turns out, Kat is a fictional character, whose sole existence rests in the rough draft this author is trying to write. That's why she doesn't remember much. because it hasn't been written yet. Her loss of time is due to the fact that she can only exist when the author is working on this script. Once again, this is a cool concept. It really reminded me of that one community end tag about the family only existing within the board game commercial.
You stupid child. Nobody's winning anything.
And the episode does manage to poke fun of the whole crime thriller genre here and there, but at the same time, these observations and jokes have been made plenty of times before. Like the jump scare cat cliche. Not to beat a dead horse, but once again, Community made a very similar joke in their Zombie Halloween episode. But in the second half, it turns out that the author is also a character in a fictional story, and this whole episode is taking place in a screenplay whose actual author decides it doesn't have any legs. So it's a bit of a double inception. However, it's one you could see coming from a mile away, and it's not like, oh, I'm so smart, I predicted the twist before it happened, or anything like that. It's more so that this episode directly telegraphs what's truly going on the second the author decides to abandon cats. I think this was a deliberate choice. Pemberton and Shearsmith probably thought this twist would have been too predictable, so they opted into revealing their hand early to have more fun with this concept, and fair enough. But I don't think there's enough fun here to justify the means. I would love to see this concept revisited, because like I said before, it's a great concept. It just needed a little bit of a rewrite. If I can give this episode anything, it's the set design, costumes, and makeup. This show typically always kills it in those three departments, but this episode specifically really nails that old grimy 16th, 17th century feel. I mean, just one look at the screen and you know it smells rank as hell in there. But everything else, I mean, it's fine. It's an episode that revolves around a witch trial, with Shearsmith and Pemberton acting as the judges hired to get to the bottom of everything. Shearsmith acts as the stereotypical witch trial hunter, throwing out any and every wild accusation in order to have a good old-fashioned stake burning, while Pemberton is much more level-headed, reasonable, and fair. So automatically, we understand these two's relationship and their dichotomy. Then we throw in Elizabeth, the accused witch, where it's kinda quickly revealed that she's not really a witch, but rather just engaging in sexual acts around town to turn a quick buck. Or shilling. Okay, the joke is too easy to make, just don't do it, Artie.
Yeah, you're right. But I don't care. I didn't know your mom was in this episode. Hey-o!
So yeah, this is a more comedically inclined episode, which is all good and fine, but once again, the humor just didn't land for me. It's not all sex jokes, but a majority are, and the few that aren't just get little nose exhales from me. Once again, humor is subjective, so if this ranks higher for you because you personally found it funny, then hey, I get it. I'm just not sailing in that same boat with you, brother. So it's very evident from the jump that Elizabeth isn't a witch. This whole episode paints how ludicrous this whole situation truly is and how hypocritical people tend to be. So the obvious twist here is that she is a witch. And wouldn't you look at that? I'll give the ending a little bit of credit. It's darkly ironic that Elizabeth's biggest defender, and the one that secretly got her off free, is the one in the wrong the entire time, and he pays the price with his life. Despite the predictability, the episode does manage to stick the landing for me. This is an episode that I initially ranked a little bit higher than where it stands now. The first viewing left me feeling rather good, but the more I reflected on it, the more I just didn't care for it. The story has a lot of moving parts and characters that are interconnected to one another, but when it's all said and done, it just feels a bit, not hollow, but basic. It centers around a group of employees and their boss having fun at a costume-themed karaoke party. The ticking time bomb here is who the boss is going to lay off. However, this is more of a red herring. The boss is down the dumps the entire time, not because he's struggling with the decision of who to lay off, but because he is currently going through a divorce. And the secret list he's carrying around the entire time is actually helping him decide on who to promote, considering that he is leaving the company and needs someone to fill his position. All in all, he's actually a pretty good boss. Which is actually how you know this is a work of fiction. I mean, a good boss? Get the fuck out of here. Now, to the show's credit, this is the big ending revelation, and it's a really good red herring, all things considered. But the build-up is much to be desired. I don't think certain scenes get the proper attention they deserve. Parts that should be suspenseful just aren't. And we get bogged down in other side stories, like all the relationship stuff between the deaf girl and the guy dressed as Michael Jackson. At least the other love triangle in this episode between these three does reach a boiling point when this guy's girlfriend learns of his cheating right after being promoted, and so promptly fires these two. It's cathartic to see these two act all scummy all episode and get what they deserve in the end, but that's kind of all this episode has going for it. There's some clever bits here and there where the characters sing songs to reveal their inner emotions to other characters, while everyone else is none the wiser. Like this very opening scene is so much fun, but unfortunately, this isn't as utilized as much as I would have liked it to be, which I think is criticism that could be applied to all aspects of this episode. Ironically, the episode centered around the political landscape of the UK was not the biggest cultural barrier for me. This episode was. And I see this kind of sentiment a lot online via American viewers. Plain and simple, this episode is all about football, or as us Americans call it, soccer. I know all the bare-bone basic rules involving the sport, but I, however, do not know all the technical little details. So when bullshit ref calls are made within the episode, and it's a massive point of contention within the narrative, I understand the dramatic stakes involved here, but I don't understand it on a technical level. I understand this one ref took a bribe to make a bad call, but I don't understand why it's a bad call, because to me, they might as well be speaking a different language here. Undoubtedly, if you're a fan of the sport, or you're British, which I think makes you automatically a fan of the sport, you're gonna get more enjoyment out of this one than me for the simple fact of understanding. Same goes for all the soccer fan culture stuff on display here. Some jokes probably clearly went over my head. However, as a whole, it still does work for me. It's just that the little details that probably make this episode more special for the people that understand them are completely lost on me. I am pleading my American ignorance on this one, so to all who love this episode, my apologies. Remember in the intro when I said this show was horror adjacent, but not strictly horror? Well, this is probably the episode that is most firmly placed within the horror realm, which just makes it all the more disappointing when I say that this episode is just alright. In terms of horror, it's fantastic. From the lighting to the framing to the acting and even the music, it absolutely knocks it out of the park. However, where this episode stumbles the most is in the story department, which is disheartening to say considering how good the first act is with setting everything up. You know, all these paintings depicting hell, the siblings our main character is house sitting for are unsettling, and all the dialogue alluding to their bedridden brother upstairs slowly clues you into the going-ons of this nightmare house, while also having a good air of mystery and intrigue to the greater story. However, the greater story never fully delivers, and ultimately ends in a rather basic fashion, which I feel like the show is smarter than this. You know, I feel like a disappointed dad. Like, for any other show, this would be a good episode, but I know that they can do better than this. Like, look, it's revealed that these people have kept their brother tied up in bed for years because they believe he's possessed by a demon, and they plan on using the main character as a new vessel for the demon to live in, considering that the brother in question is nearing the end of his life. But as our main character points out, their brother isn't possessed. He was just born with some deformities, and these people have been cruelly and inhumanely torturing this guy for years. This is a very dark ending that perfectly aligns itself with Inside Number 9's overall tone. However, it turns out that this guy is in fact possessed by a demon, and the vessel transfer process proceeds as planned. I guess it's a double pump fake out sort of twist ending. Like, they build up this demon-possessed character throughout the entire episode to the point where you truly start to think that he is possessed. But once you get to actually know him, yeah, it just seems like the others are wrapped up in some sort of hysteria. But then of course, nah, it was a demon all along. If that is its true intentions in that regard, I think it's really clever. But I also think the pacing in the final act moves far too fast for this to really land. Like, I needed this whole tortured human angle to resonate a bit longer to get the full effects of this double fake out. At a glance, an episode like this being so far down on the list may not be shocking. I mean, it's a season 9 episode. Most other shows, when they get that high up in season counts, don't typically put out their best work. I mean, season 9 of X-Files is borderline unwatchable for me. The only bright spot in that whole season is the episode Sunshine Days. I don't know if that's a hot take, but that's always been my take. But ironically, Season 9 of Inside Number 9 might just be my favorite season. You'll find out eventually that this season was filled with absolute bangers, which just makes this particular episode stand out even more. Now, this isn't a bad episode by any means. It's actually rather solid, but just very standard. It plays off the whole urban legend about how very famous composers end up dying before they complete their 9th symphony. And this family tricks this piano tuner into completing their father's work because, despite saying they don't believe in the superstition, they kinda do. And rightfully so, because there is in fact an entity out there that prevents the completion of said work. I have the same praise I did for the last entry. The sets, costumes, and makeup are all really good. And these old-fashioned corridors really add to this gloomy atmosphere to what is essentially a solid ghost story. It seems a bit late in the show's run to play it safe with a rather basic story, but perhaps they just wanted one more nice and simple one for the road. And you know what? I can get behind that. This episode is the show's rendition of Macbeth, but done in modern times through the perspective of an understudy's role in the production of Macbeth. And so, I'm assuming you know exactly where the story goes. I mean, back in high school, along with Romeo and Juliet, this was required reading for most people. That's not to downplay the episode by any means. The slight change in setting offers a fun new perspective, and the acting is always top-notch. It's just that it's not a new story by any means. I think that's probably why this is a lesser praised episode within the fandom. However, it does play on your expectations given the source material in terms of the character Lady Macbeth. You know, the pivotal character that manipulates her husband into killing the king, right? It's clearly the understudy's girlfriend. I mean, the writing is on the wall throughout the entire episode given her actions and dialogue, but no. In a twist, the assistant character was the one that pulled the strings the entire time in the background. Prior knowledge to the Macbeth story essentially made this one character within the narrative a complete blind spot for viewers. So even when Inside Number 9 is retelling a classic story, they'll still hit you with a nice little twist. So I do consider this an underrated episode, but at the same time, not enough to move it up any higher on the list. So, I don't know if it's because it's a season 8 episode, or if I just watched a lot of Inside Number 9 at this point, but Love is a Stranger to Me had the most predictable twist ending in the entire show. 1 minute in, I made a prediction, and it came true.
I predict that the Detroit Lions will win the Super Bowl this year.
Well, if it happens, you know what video to come back to and leave a comment on. I mean, off rip they have news coverage talking about the Lonely Hearts Killer, who is a serial killer whose victims can all be linked back to this one video chat speed dating site that our main character just so happens to be spending time on. The show does try to throw you off the scent a little bit. All the news coverage avoids giving the killer or the victims a gender, making us the audience assume the killer is male and the victims are female, and the person at the end of the episode is just one big red herring that is kinda spoiled if you can see through all the smoke and mirrors. Now, I don't think this detracts from the overall episode. It detracts from the final scene. Seeing the twist coming from a mile away does in fact lessen the suspense here. But the rest of the episode is just some good old-fashioned witty fun. It's that classic awkward British sense of humor on full display. So if that's not your cup of tea, then this episode might not be for you. It is, however, my cup of tea. But even then, I feel like this episode had less of a plot, and more so funny character vignettes. So for me, it excels in the comedy, but kinda lacks in the narrative. Overall, creating a very decent episode, all things considered. It may be a forgotten tradition at this point, but Pemberton and Shearsmith have remembered that the Christmas season is for telling ghost stories. The Bones of St. Nicholas, I think, is probably one of the best looking episodes in the show's catalog. It's absolutely dripping in atmosphere. The still dark halls of the church are dreadfully creepy, further exemplified by the acting in this scene right here that paints the whole story as just downright spooky. Light comedic moments here and there keep it from being too much, and countless misdirections will constantly keep you on your toes as to what comes next.
All in all, sounds like a good episode. Why is it ranked 43 then?
Yeah, this might be disheartening or downright infuriating to some, but have you ever watched something and recognized all the elements that make it good, but for some reason, just didn't care for it? Yeah, that's kinda how I feel about this episode. Don't get it twisted. It's a good episode, and I can see why people consider it a great episode even. But there's something here that I just can't articulate why, that prevents me from truly enjoying it. I think if anything, it's that this show has so many good episodes with a variety of different subject matters, and this specific subject matter just simply didn't grab me. I don't typically go in for ghost stories all too much. And of course, they subverted by making the ghost not technically a ghost, but rather Pemberton's character's future self carrying out an almost self-fulfilled prophecy. But I don't know. This one just ain't for me. I do, however, understand if people would rank this one significantly higher than me. It's just different strokes for different folks in the end of the day. This is an episode I actually liked better when all the seemingly self-contained stories were disconnected, and it kinda loses its luster towards the end when the episode tries to connect them all. I understand that's the point of the episode and the final big twist, but I don't know. I like the self-contained nature of seemingly random characters sharing their most interpersonal struggles with the camera. I mean, individually, they were all compelling in their own unique way. I mean, Shearsmith's character? Holy shit, dude. A dying man recording a message for his unborn baby so they have something to remember him by after he's gone. And we see his health slowly start to deteriorate. And it's gut-wrenching. And then juxtaposing this with the more upbeat 2014 girly pop vlogger is just darkly comedic to me. Too bad it doesn't fucking mean anything. Yeah, so as it turns out, all these different characters that we have gotten invested in throughout the episode were all just personalities of this one woman who suffers from dissociative identity disorder, or DID for short. And what a way to take the wind out of the sails. This is a pretty divisive episode amongst the fanbase from what I can tell. People oftentimes putting this one towards the bottom of their fan lists, and I am almost inclined to agree. If only the first half of this episode wasn't so goddamn good. Mainly Shearsmith's segment, but I also like Pemberton's serial killer stuff quite a bit. It's fun seeing him put on an American accent. And from what I've read online, people don't tend to like the vlogger character, but I don't know. They capture this kind of mid-2010s storytime vlogger so authentically, I kind of have to respect it. Television getting social media influencers right is almost impossible, so I gotta give this show its roses. Also, this final revelation isn't even done in an organic way. The woman's therapist just comes right out and spoon-feeds the audience the answers. It's completely and utterly over-explained. To some, maybe this episode is too far up on this list, but to me, it's like eating cereal. The first half is great, while the second half is just all soggy. And while it sours the back half, I really enjoyed myself at the start. Okay, if you've seen my other videos, you would know I have a soft spot in my heart for stories involving brothers reconciling, and well, if this isn't just heartwarming. But biases aside, the episode is decent. Inside Number 9 excels in a bunch of different areas, but an often neglected area is the fun, campy, over-the-top side that this show only slightly dabbles in. So it's great to see a final act just cut loose and let these actors really ham it up, while also somehow still maintaining this heartwarming through line.
Heartwarming? More like fartwarming. You know?
Are you even trying anymore?
Honestly, I've been checked out since birth.
Two brothers break into the deceased mother's old place of residence and hope to contact her from beyond the grave to figure out where she kept her money. But when the new homeowners unexpectedly come home, it may seem like a little funny, awkward moment, but quickly turns into the brothers' detriment. Turns out, this new homeowner was part of the mafia, and despite how outlandish contacting the dead may seem, they're not above trying it themselves. And this whole scene is just perfect. These two just casually talking like an old married couple while also deciding on who to sacrifice for the ritual is just great. But this little predicament also perfectly sets up the brother characters to have this heart-to-heart with each other and apologize for their past behavior. All in all, it may seem like I have very little negatives with this episode, and truthfully, I don't. The simple fact is, I just liked other episodes more than this one, and I think that speaks volumes to the overall quality of this show. This episode reminds me a lot of the Saw franchise, except it's less trap focus and more so a murder mystery. However, the flippant, oftentimes asinine philosophy of Jigsaw is very much alive within this character. You see, a whole group of seemingly random people get invited to this private art exhibition from this one artist who passed away 3 years ago, and one by one they are slowly picked off. So it's up to the group to figure out who's behind the murders, deducing that they're all probably brought here for a similar reason, but just don't know why. Well, as it turns out, this older lady here was the artist's mother, and everyone else here has received some sort of organ from the artist shortly after his passing as a donation. However, her main beef here, and why she's murdering these people, is because according to her, they are wasting her son's gifts. Some of them I agree with, like the man who got his liver was practically drinking himself to death. Or the man who got his lungs, who is a smoker, or specifically a vapor, which is technically better than smoking, but I don't know. Just give it 15 to 20 years, I guarantee you there are going to be some horrifying studies coming out about the long-term effects of vaping.
Nah, fuck you, dude. I'm gonna continue to smack my Uber Goober Double Berry Triple Sunrise Flavor Blast Surprise Geek Bar Plus. Thank you very much.
So that all makes sense, right? But then she kills this chick because she got her son's skin and then got tattoos? Like, I feel like that's subjective. Tattoos aren't bad for your health like drinking or smoking. Seems a bit arbitrary, but that's clearly the point. It's humorous and poking fun at this kind of archetype that tries to justify their means of murder. Like, in the end, we find out that Shearsmith's character received her son's heart, and she plans on killing him because, in her words, he became a heartless critic. He rightfully points out that that's a giant stretch, which she acknowledges but doesn't care. If there's anything I can fault this episode for, is that some of the characters I don't think get enough screen time. And I also think it takes a while for the episode to start truly rolling. But other than that, this one's pretty nice. Listen, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this word. I'm just going to make a fool of myself.
It's pronounced Paraskividae tryphobia.
Nobody likes to show off. I'll save you the Google search though. This phobia is a fear of Friday the 13th, and that's what this whole episode revolves around. A man staying home from work because it's Friday the 13th. Meanwhile, everything that could go wrong does go wrong. I'll say this up front. I think the worst of this episode is all up front. And as it progresses, it gets better and better. In the start, I felt like the humor was just missing its mark. It was just so flat and slow. But if there's one thing Inside Number 9 does best, it's making certain situations way worse than you ever thought possible. Things just keep humorously piling up for this one poor dude, which is actually one big elaborate plan set in motion by this man's wife to help him get over his fear of Friday the 13th. It's hard to determine what exactly was planned and what was just happenstance, but I think that's what's fun about this episode. It's a late season 8 episode, so my expectations weren't the highest. So I'm just glad it manages to be unabashedly fun. I was a bit shocked to learn that this episode isn't particularly liked amongst the fanbase. I mean, I can understand the common complaints. It's a bit linear and predictable, and for an Inside Number 9 episode, it's a bit toothless. Its commentary isn't as poignant or cutting as other entries. In fact, it can come across as a little repetitive at times. But for all of its faults, it stays focused. A famous pop star visits a sick little girl and dies while blowing up a balloon. The manager, the Make-A-Wish rep, and the father quickly realize that this balloon contains the man's last breath and would fetch for a high price online. And so we get a classic story of greed and what these characters would do to attain fortune and money.
Would you publicly embarrass yourself for money?
I make YouTube videos. I already do that. Like I said, it's super straightforward, but I think it's really fun seeing how each of these three characters go about justifying their actions. They all have seemingly noble causes for why they want the money, but truthfully, each one has a more selfish desire. It's great seeing their own true individual nature unravel as the episode progresses. So while I get all the criticism people have about this episode, and agree with them in a general sense, I can't help but to like this one, at least a little bit more than normal. I have never truly been so blindsided and disgusted with a twist more than I have with this episode right here. There's a lot of factors at play here that make this truly jarring. The first half is boring as sin, but deliberately so, as we follow a painfully mundane failing marriage. The spark in this relationship has been long snuffed out. The spice is no longer there, and no matter how much this wife tries to heat things up, the atmosphere remains frigid. This accomplishes two things. The slower, awkward mundanity of everything completely blindsides you from this sudden gut punch. But it also really makes you wonder what exactly this twist is going to be. Where is this story going? Well, as it turns out, this man keeps a secret sex slave locked up in his basement. I didn't see that one coming. And this episode kind of hits you twice with disturbing revelations. Once in the halfway point where it's revealed for the first time, and then again in the ending where it's revealed that this man had a child with this sex slave who was also locked up down there. So if you somehow weren't grossed out the first time, the show definitely got you in the end. It puts this episode in a vicarious position, because I understand the first half is so slow and awkward to really make this twist hit even harder, but at the same time, it's slow and awkward. And rewatching this episode, knowing the twist, really lessens the viewing experience the second time around, because you just gotta sit through and watch this failing sex life again. That being said, there's definitely moments that benefit from a rewatch, like the whole pot noodle thing. It makes me sick when it's brought up in the first act, knowing their true purpose. So it's still what I considered a good episode, but only truly impactful on its first viewing. Once again, another episode that isn't highly regarded amongst the fanbase that I ended up liking a fair bit. If anything, it's mainly because it's a peek behind the curtains of the going-ons of a television production. It's filled with jokes and scenarios that are all too familiar for those who have worked in this kind of field before. Undoubtedly, Pemberton and Shearsmith probably drew from their real-life experiences with this one, even if it's just a tad bit. The actual story here to me was a bit inconsequential. It's done well, and I'm honestly surprised how much characterization Shearsmith can pack into his performance considering the 30-minute runtime. But this episode, to me, lives and dies by their character interactions, which thankfully, that's what this whole episode focuses on. The actual story of the kid from back in the day embarrassing himself on television and then taking his own life and then haunting the current set to get back at the main character is fine. It's serviceable. But honestly, the drama that ensues when Pemberton's character supposedly accidentally kills one of the cast members was much more enthralling than all the ghost stuff.
Hey, to the person drawing while watching this video, I just want to say, you're drawing on the wrong layer. Just want to point it out before it gets any worse.
Not to say I'm against the supernatural angle, I'm very much for it, but the more grounded story here was significantly more compelling. But hey, I had my fun either way. I know British humor tends to excel within its awkwardness, but man, did this episode really make me feel uncomfortable. I think it's because we've all been in a somewhat relatable position as our main character. You know, similar vibes to visiting your friend's extended family that you just don't know, but dialed up to 11. Or like when you wake up first at a sleepover and have to talk to your friend's parents. Similar to the last entry, the actual story here works well enough in regards to moving the plot along and provoking dialogue exchanges, but I was never truly that invested. Once again, the character interactions really make this episode for me, and the whole twist ending was a tad bit predictable in my opinion. I really did enjoy the final minute Hail Mary red herring, however. I was fully on board with the long-lost kidnapped kid being the daughter of the household. It was certainly the more obvious direction to take this story that they managed to subvert. However, the subversion isn't the best. In fact, I think it's a little more basic than the fake out, but I never put too much weight into that aspect of this episode. When simply put, the dialogue is king here. I especially love the scene between the acting veteran and the complete newbie. How this older guy just steals all of his lines and then forces him into saying it's his creative decision. And then seeing the end result had me laughing out loud, where we just see the back of Shearsmith's head with no lines. It's great. So in the end, solid enough story, but the character interactions are really where it's at. Seems like a running theme with episodes that rank around this spot. Huh. A unemployed man finds a random shoe one day and then becomes obsessed with finding its owner. This episode really highlights what little control we have over our own lives and the seemingly innocuous things we obsess over while searching for meaning. I mean, even self-appointedly so, when we learn that this man was the one who purposely placed a shoe from his own collection there in the first place. Perhaps one of the more tamer twist endings in the series, but impactful nonetheless. It's a good episode, all things considered. I think my only gripe with it is that it's a bit of a slow burn, which I understand why, but on a personal level, it took me a good while to get fully invested in this one. It also leaves me with not being able to talk about much because there's not much to really talk about. So it's a good episode. I just wished it moved a bit faster and maybe had some other element to hook me a bit better. I understand a lot of the criticisms thrown at episodes that I like that the fans may not enjoy. I, however, don't understand why this episode is so disliked amongst the fans. I'm not saying it's the best episode ever. I mean, clearly so. It couldn't even crack top 30, but I think it gets a lot of unnecessary hate. One thing I think this episode absolutely excels at is constantly having the viewers on the edge of their seats. Like, the cold open to this episode is a paramedic rushing into this house, and then the episode begins with the prior events that led up to that cold open. So the entire episode keeps setting up small little things that could possibly go wrong, having the audience constantly guessing what causes this paramedic to come to the house. This, coupled with the unraveling family drama, really makes this a tantalizing and suspenseful watch the entire time. Even if the whole paramedic thing is just one big fake out, he's actually just a stripper, and everyone's fine in the end. But it still works for me, and it's also a hilarious subversion. Really just felt like a golden era The Simpsons screw the audience type of joke. I loved it. I think the common complaint here is that a lot of the humor in this episode is just very subtle. There's a lot of jokes that could be easily missed. And the drama in this episode, which is essentially two unhappy marriages clashing heads, seems at odds with itself. I think, if anything, it lacks a strong focal point, bouncing around from plot point to plot point with never really giving a strong resolution to any of them. But in my viewing, I think that's perhaps the point. Families are messy, and there are oftentimes no answers to certain problems. It's bleak, but it's honest. I can't claim it's a great episode, and I certainly wouldn't label it as a bad episode. I think it's a good episode with a lot of faults that I'm just able to look past. Probably one of the biggest tearjerkers in the entire series. While I think it can get a little melodramatic at times and borders on being hallmarky at certain moments, along with certain plot points just being kind of dumb, I can't lie. This one really did move me. I think it's due to the episode's relatability. Listen, we all like to paint ourselves as saints who have done no wrong, but I guarantee you, at some point in time, you've treated your mother like absolute shit. For no other reason than just being an angsty, hormonal-fueled teenager. And of course, we all regret that time as adults looking back. It's also a little bit cringe looking back. So, while I was nowhere near this mean or dismissive of my own mother when I was a teen, I still embarrassingly can understand what it's like being at that age. The plot of this episode sees this teen from the future travel back in time to basically tell his younger self, hey, love your mother. She's gonna die from cancer in a couple of years, which actually drastically alters this young man's trajectory in life. Instead of physics, he goes into medical science and makes a cure for cancer, and now lives in a future where his mom got to live to an old age. It's a little too sappy for me. Like, it's sweet, I get the sentiment, but it seems a little, I don't know, too good? But maybe that's the point. This other character, who isn't properly explored nearly enough, ends up trying to kill him and somehow makes all the events of this one episode one big time loop.
Yeah, never expect this show to end on a completely positive note. It can happen, but it's a little rare.
So all the time travel stuff at the end just isn't for me. I think it totally clashes with the rest of the episode. Like, this scene when the mother comes back after getting diagnosed is just so devastatingly perfect. And then it's like, whoa, wacky future shenanigans. like, dude, not now. This episode is still good. I just think the ending is holding it back from being truly great. Huh, would you look at that? Another tear-jerking episode. I guess we went from episodes with solid stories but good character interactions straight into emotional tear-jerkers. I think if you pay attention enough, you can chart my own personal tastes in stories. But I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this one because I don't think I have a lot to say about it. This episode follows a bunch of old college friends reuniting, and there's one dude's girlfriend who he just invites along, unbeknownst to the others. It's actually a big point of contention within the group and makes for a good central conflict. But what seems like old friends reconnecting on this dinky little boat for old time's sake, it's eventually revealed that Shearsmith's character's wife has recently passed away, and the true purpose of this trip is to scatter her ashes. Well, this character ends up passing away due to hypothermia caused by him swimming in the water at night once their boat gets stuck. And the whole episode ends with him crossing the river Styx and reconvening with his deceased wife. I know I am completely deflating this episode's emotional moments by summarizing this episode in this matter-of-fact way. Like, this scene of Shearsmith on this island really gets to me. It's just that this one's rather simple, which works to the story's benefit. It really gives the characters room to breathe and explore the relationships amongst one another, but leaves me with not much to comment on. I like it more than the last emotional episode just because I feel like the pacing is a little bit tighter. So it's a good episode, just almost a great one. I think this episode is the gold standard for how to do meta humor. Meta-based comedy is becoming more and more prevalent in the modern age, and oftentimes, for my tastes, it's a little bit too much wink wink nudge nudge with the audience, if you catch my drift. But this episode is able to have fun while also not being excessive and actually delivers a pretty good story. Undoubtedly, there's some subtext that I think went over my head. Some comments made throughout this episode, some fans speculate could be alluding to shows like Sherlock, Line of Duty, or even Game of Thrones. I can't comment on that, however, because I haven't seen a single episode of any of those shows. But that kind of knowledge, or lack thereof, doesn't deter me from the overall episode in the slightest. Because the more meta jabs at the television industry at large just fit in so organically. And this episode is having fun with both sides of the same coin. It pokes fun of showbiz as much as it does the fans. But never to the point where it's like, I get it. This, in return, actually allows this episode's story to really shine through. A superfan helps cover up a television writer's murder and then blackmails him into writing another season of his favorite show, with the fan now helping co-write it to better match his vision. It has little shades of Stephen King's Misery thrown in there for sure. And then I think this is one of the few episodes with a triple twist. Like, turns out the guy the writer killed is alive. It was an elaborate ploy to blackmail him in the first place. That's twist number 1. But then the fan just decides to murder him for real, prompting the writer to kill the fan. That's kinda twist number 2. But then it turns out that the man is alright, and it was, once again, all just one big ploy to get the fan cast into the actual show. You know? He was trying to show off his acting chops here. And then the writer just actually kills him. No witnesses, I guess. And that's twist number 3. Honestly, a really great episode. But unfortunately, this series is just filled with bangers. It may seem like it placed low on this ranking, but trust me, it has a lot of stiff competition. So far, I've talked about a lot of generally disliked episodes that I tend to like more than the fanbase. Well, here's probably the first big one that fans love that I just don't as much. Just for clarity, it's a great episode. I just don't love it to the extent of others. But I do love the format in which the story is told. As you can undoubtedly tell, this entire story is told through these webcams and security cameras based in this one support hotline call center. I guess it's kinda like thinking out loud, but a little bit more realized and effective, in my opinion. I just love when shows have the freedom to mess around with visual storytelling devices. And having this episode centered around a hotline, thanks to this format, means we get to listen in to some truly uncomfortable phone calls. But it's also perfectly juxtaposed to the more mundane, gossipy workplace environment. It's a tough tone to balance, but this episode walks that line perfectly. Approaching sensitive subject matters with humor is something I'm surprised Inside Number 9 always manages to pull off rather gracefully. But more or less. Now, I do like the main story here. There's essentially 2 red herrings that really threw me off, which made the final revelation truly shocking. But the ending, like the actual ending, it's just super silly to me. You see, our main character gets a phone call from a teenage girl who ends up taking her own life. This shakes him to his core, but is surprised, and more so infuriated, when she calls back later on. This, in return, makes our main character go off on the next caller, who just so happens to be an old lady, and because of his comments, she ends up taking her own life. Well, in the end, it's revealed that the manager of this call center was the one posing as the teenage girl, faking the entire story to, I don't know, get his rocks off, I guess. It's a good twist, and I love that. This is where the episode should have ended. But in the final seconds, a new volunteer comes in to shadow our main character for the day, where it turns out that he's the son of the old lady, and seeking revenge, he shoots the main character, cutting right to credits. It's just kinda dumb. It feels like this episode wanted to go out with another big punch, but in my opinion, they just completely whiffed on this one. Leaves a sour taste in my mouth, but I'm not daft enough to say it ruins the entire episode because it doesn't. It's just a little silly and I can overlook it. It just has me perplexed because they had the perfect ending here and just decided to push it further, I guess. Listen, I'm gonna keep it quick with this one. As this ranking series goes on, there has been an abundance of one particular type of episode, and that's the classic be careful what you wish for, monkey's paw type of episode. And that's exactly what this episode is here, but it does get some bonus points for being the only episode that makes the Easter egg, i.e. the brass hair, an actually plot relevant object. It's the wish granter, essentially. I don't mean to sell this one short by any means. There's some good characterization, and the twist ending is pretty good. It's just that I've seen a lot of episodes like this. It follows the basic beats, but does them very well. But at the same time, I feel like I don't have anything more to say that I haven't said a million times before in my past videos. I know this may seem unfair to new viewers, but hey, it gives you a reason to watch my other videos. If you couldn't tell by the title of the episode, then yes. This episode is based around this trolley problem image. It's basically an ethical thought experiment. If you don't pull the lever, 5 people will die. If you pull the lever, only 1 person will die. You know, it highlights the complexities of moral decision making. Like, Artie, what would you do in this scenario?
I don't know, it's a little tricky. Is there a way I can kill them all?
No, that's not the point. And while this episode isn't a one-to-one translation of the thought experiment, there's not even a trolley to be seen in the entire episode. The core philosophy of the trolley problem, whether you should intervene or leave things the way they are the crux of this episode. A therapist saves a man from taking his own life, because it's the morally right thing to do, but he quickly learns to regret his decision, because as it turns out, this was all one big elaborate plan by this one guy. You see, as this episode begins, this therapist character seems like a great, respectful guy. But as the episode continues, we learn that he's not really even a therapist. He got all of his qualifications online. And specifically, this man who has come to kill him because he sexually assaulted his daughter, who ended up taking her own life because of it. This episode will have you constantly bouncing back and forth between who you see as morally right. It's a captivating experience throughout, whose only downsides are really that some plot points come across as a bit contrived, but an overall great episode nonetheless. This is another episode that is a complete visual treat. As you can already tell, this episode is almost entirely told in split screen. Now, it does bring into question whether or not this is a situation of style over substance, and I gotta say, they got some good mileage out of the split screen gimmick and use it rather effectively. However, there are moments where I feel like it's not used to its best ability. If anything, the utilization gets a bit old. Its main implementations is to highlight the contrast of any given situation. The opening illustrates this perfectly. But other than that, there's like one part where it really helps with the suspense of a scene. And I just wish they had some more interesting narrative beats that utilize the split screen through a different lens.
You mean like a wide angle or even a macro lens?
Dude, that's a horrible, lame joke.
You're the one that writes the script, dickhead.
Beyond the visual style, it also just manages to be an enthralling story. A man's wife gets kidnapped and the hostage takers demand $1 million, or pounds, for her release. But it's eventually revealed that one of the captors and this woman have been hooking up for a while now. And this is a collaborative effort so she can get away from her husband and make off with some money and her new boy toy. Unfortunately, this information wasn't shared with his other henchmen, leading to a bit of confusion and a bit of a tussle that ends with this man's death. So now, essentially, Homegirl over here has been taken as a legit hostage. A little fuck around and find out. You love to see it. I also love Shearsmith's character in this episode so much. He is so business focused that despite his wife's life being in danger, he's trying to negotiate the asking price down, almost like a business deal. There is no sense of urgency with this man. Performances all around this episode, as per usual, are fantastic. I just wanted to highlight Shearsmith's real quick. Overall, great episode, fun gimmick. I just wish we got a little bit more out of it. Okay, so this is the one episode that directly calls back to the creator's previous work in Psychoville. It has more than just some quick cameos, although it certainly has that. But the emphasis of this one truly is on these two right here, this mother and son character. And while I have never seen an episode of Psychoville, this just seems like one big Psychoville episode to me. Kind of like an epilogue to that series given the subject matter of moving on. So undoubtedly, if you liked Pemberton and Shearsmith's Psychoville, this episode is going to make you rock hard. But as an outsider, it still works. They still introduce these characters in a way so that this episode will be accessible to everyone. And hey, this episode is so great, I might just have to check out the series sometime. It's funny too because there's an actual story here between this couple who move into this new apartment, but it's completely thrown to the sidelines to focus more on these Psychoville characters. Like when I got to the end of the episode, I kind of forgot about these characters completely. They more so bookend the episode, and that's totally fine by me. The Bill is another classic Inside Number 9 episode. It's one big elaborate con that you won't see coming until it's revealed. I do think, however, the ending doesn't really make sense and kind of weighs the episode down because of it. You see, these three set up this scenario in which they argue over who gets to pay the bill. The outsider here is a rich man. One thing leads to another, and they make this poor guy accidentally kill this waitress, with Shearsmith's character declaring that he knows a guy that can get them out of this pickle for a large sum of money. Only problem being, the facade is quickly dropped. Yeah, this waitress isn't actually dead. It was all part of the plan to extort money from this guy. It's a little contrived, because there are a lot of events that have to go exactly according to plan for this to work. But hey, I'll buy it. And in the end, we see the same three characters pulling the scam on a new person, with now the rich guy posing as the waiter? It just doesn't make sense why this guy would join a gang to carry out this scheme. I mean, unless they're extorting him somehow. I mean, a simple solution would be just to make this character super money hungry and willing to do anything to turn a quick buck. But that's not a part of his characterization. So this flip at the end doesn't really add up for me.
Rich people will do anything for money though.
I mean, maybe that's what they're trying to say here, but it's not clear enough. But hey, the rest of the episode is bang on for me. Once again, it's another dialogue-heavy episode where we really get to explore these characters. It's great. I just wish the ending was reworked a little bit. I know, travesty that this episode didn't end up in the top 20, but hey, it got close. Tom and Jerry does two things exceedingly well. One being the double fake out ending that I will talk about in a second, and two being that this is such a brutally honest depiction of depression. As someone who has grappled really badly with depression in his early 20s, it's unflinching how real some of this can get. There's the surface level stuff, like not taking care of your own hygiene, letting the filth pile up, and pushing the people who want the best for you away, and so on and so on. But the part that really got me was when Shearsmith's character halts his own personal career to focus on his dreams. Self-sabotaging your own financial safety nets to focus on the one thing that brings you happiness amongst your depression because you are just that depressed is an aspect that hardly anyone ever brings up. Better yet, in a short amount of time, that dream, that hobby that Shearsmith has, stops bringing him happiness. And it just makes you question if anything can make you happy again. Don't worry though, I'm in a much better and healthier place. And just remember to always reach out to your loved ones. I guarantee you, you're more loved than you think, and your problems aren't a burden. Seriously. But let's talk about that ending, because man, it got my ass. So, Shearsmith's character starts hanging out with this one homeless guy who is more than just an enabler. He's a straight-up destructive enabler. But at the same time, his girlfriend, Jerry, is never able to see him. They are never in the same room at the same time. Okay, so obviously this homeless guy isn't real. It's a manifestation of Shearsmith's depression. So all the sabotaging throughout this episode was actually just a form of self-sabotaging. So when Shearsmith drowns him in the bath at the end, it's more so a metaphor for snuffing out his depression and kind of conquering it in a way. But then it's revealed that Jerry was the one that never existed. Just a physical manifestation of Shearsmith's more good side trying to talk sense into him. Well, in that case, then maybe Jerry and the homeless man were both physical manifestations, like the classic angel and devil be on your shoulder, right? Well, no. Turns out this homeless man was very much a real person, meaning Tom very much just killed a man in his own bathtub. This show repeatedly lets you know that you can try to predict the twist ending, and sometimes you may get it right, but other times, you're just gonna be dead wrong. This episode reminds you that no matter how much you think you figured out the show's formula, you really haven't. This one probably has one of the biggest curveballs in the series. I mean, I was absolutely blindsided by this one. I think that's just mainly because I was so invested in these two's seemingly real relationship. I mean, it was absolutely gut-wrenching seeing this couple navigate this impending grief that was to come. And their journey navigating this through the 5 stages of grief was just beautiful. And then that twist comes. Pemberton's character doesn't have cancer, the love wasn't real, and all of those 9 years spent together was just one big sham to get back at Shearsmith's character for indirectly leading Pemberton's daughter towards taking her own life.
I have been in a lot of car crashes, but that wasn't serious whiplash.
I'm starting to see why they took away your license now. I was gearing up for this ending to be absolutely heartbreaking, but I could never imagine my heartbreak would flip in such an instant. I thought the twist was going to be that Pemberton's character has actually been dead for some time now, and this was Shearsmith's way of coping. You know, they've done episodes like that before, where they get really sappy and sentimental on us. But I guess that's too been there, done that for the show, because they come out of left field with this absolute haymaker. And I love it. As invested as I was in this relationship drama, this is definitely the more interesting angle to end the episode on. It is very uniquely inside number 9, I can tell you that much. A dark, moody, and spooky episode. A style Pemberton and Shearsmith only periodically dip their toes into from time to time, but when they do, man, do they nail this dreadful, gloomy atmosphere every time. Also, a bit surprised it took 6 seasons for Pemberton to play a literal devil. This is in his wheelhouse. I'm just shocked it took so long. Unsurprising though is that Shearsmith steals the show again for me. It's something about characters with secretive tragic backstories that Shearsmith just really nails. I think it's because he can keep that mask up, a man barely holding everything together, and when it's time to spill their guts, it comes pouring out in a haunting fashion. Pemberton's also really good when it comes to this, but Shearsmith just has some of the best monologues in the entire series. I can't really fault this episode for anything. It's a classic selling your soul to the devil sort of story. It does everything perfectly. It's just that, once again, this show is so good. And the top 20, in my opinion, just has some seriously stiff competition. Lip Service is the quintessential Inside Number 9 episode. I think it has everything I love about this series, while also having everything to get new fans familiar with its structure. It has the middle of the episode twist that drastically reframes how we view certain characters and events, while also having the complete bombshell twist ending that radically changes how we view the entire episode. It's so smart at having seemingly innocuous little details actually be relevant to the overall story, like having this man's ex-wife be an assistant to some political candidate. Just seems like a little detail thrown there to better sell how inferior he feels in comparison. But as it turns out, this man was the target all along, and the ex-husband was just a really convenient cover to not connect anyone with this assassination. It's simply brilliant, yet effortless for this show. I think my one and only downside, and it's actually a bit of a nitpick, is actually in Shearsmith's character, or at least his implementation throughout the episode. He plays a hotel manager who is constantly checking in on Pemberton's character and making sure he's in fact alone. His scenes are more comedic in tone, but I feel like this missed the opportunity to implement a good amount of suspense. I don't know, he just kind of slows down the pacing a bit, interrupts the story a bit too much, and unfortunately, doesn't add what I think his character could have added to the story at large. But ultimately, it doesn't detract too much, and this episode is still fantastic, regardless. This episode does what Inside Number 9 does best. Take a collective cast of characters with clashing personalities, give them some funny moments that are humorous but also work as great insights into their character, and then give them an inciting incident that gives them a reason to debate their morals amongst one another. Case in point, this episode is about passengers on an overnight train debating on what they should do once they find out that one of the passengers has died. The cabin is essentially split, with half wanting to hit the emergency stop button and warn the proper authorities, and the other half just want to get to their destination on time and then report the body to the proper authorities. And you know what? You can really see both sides of this argument. Some have important time-specific things to get to, while the other's argument is that this man has a family and he must be taken care of right away. Also, it's a little creepy to be sleeping in a cabin with a dead man. For some people, I guess. Artie, what would you do in this scenario?
Oh, I would eat the body.
You see, I would... Come again? It's a good ethical conundrum, and I think every character plays their role perfectly. I specifically love the married couple. Pemberton and Shearsmith have a knack for writing working-class characters with such a degree of realism. It's perfect. And the twist in this episode is another devilish classic. You see, Shearsmith's character was the one that killed this man. He's on his way to an important job interview, and that man just so happened to be his only competition. Except, nah. The actual person Shearsmith was supposed to kill was Pemberton's character, who was just a drunken, gross German sleeping in the wrong bed. So this random man was murdered for absolutely nothing. It's a classic Inside Number 9 ending in all senses of the word. And to me, it's one of the most classic endings in the show. With a title like Misdirection, and the story focusing around magicians, and Inside Number 9 being known for its twists, it's a little easy to predict what's going to happen, but the how remains a mystery. Like, this episode is all about Shearsmith's character killing this other magician to steal his trick. Years later, he becomes very successful off this one trick, and is being interviewed by this one guy who just so happens to be the dead magician's son. It's very clear to see that he's trying to find some sort of evidence that Shearsmith killed his father, and given the nature of this plot, it's safe to assume, despite Shearsmith thwarting all of his shenanigans, that this young man will be successful in the end. But once again, it's not the why we're focused on, it's the how that makes this interesting. We all know whatever plan he's got cooking up is going to be successful, but how is he going to pull it off? I guess in that regard, it is kind of like a magic trick. And don't worry, this is still inside number 9 after all, so the original plan isn't what it seems, and the episode is still able to hit us with a twist. This young man wasn't really trying to find any evidence, but plant it. You see, he could probably never convict Shearsmith for murdering his father, so instead, he murders Shearsmith's wife, and this whole time he was planting evidence to frame him. One way or another, he was going away for murder. It's just a really fun and elaborate episode to watch and will really keep you guessing. Every little detail could mean something, and every little detail does have a purpose in the end. So if you're the type who likes to overanalyze, then this is the perfect episode for you. It's fantastic. The stakeout opens with how this episode is going to end, and still, it remains unpredictable. Sometimes I just get pissed at how clever this show can be. What follows is a pretty standard cop procedural, told from one point of view, with a great air of mystery. Once again, I think Pemberton and Shearsmith shine the brightest when they are writing episodes between two characters, doubly so if they happen to play those two characters. So you get some absolutely brilliant dialogue and banter, while the central mystery component of the episode will still have you on your toes, constantly guessing who's killed his cop's previous partner. You may assume it's Shearsmith, and well, you're right, but also, did you happen to guess that he's a vampire? Because yeah, he's a vampire. All the clues are there within the episode, but the fantastical nature of this story having vampires seems so outlandish. It's not really going to be a forethought anyone will have. Therefore, this makes for a great rewatch knowing this information, like how Shearsmith only works the night shift, or has a super sensitive nose towards garlic. I don't think this revelation jumps the shark, per se. It seems so out of left field that I can understand such a conclusion. However, I think it's perfectly in line with the slightly more gothic tone set up in this episode. I mean, the backdrop of the graveyard is such a nice visual touch, but also works its way into the story's narrative. Overall, it's a fantastic little episode. This is probably one of the saddest, weirdest, and eeriest episodes out there. There's this strange, perpetual, gloomy atmosphere that just lingers over this episode. The one that kinda makes you feel uneasy watching it. It's about a man stuck in his own adolescence due to past traumas. Mainly the death of his sister when he was younger, which he believes is his fault, and the abuse brought on by his father. As an adult, he lives his life dictated by the advice from an old PSA mascot called Wise Owl. These Wise Owl segments perfectly encapsulate these animated low-budget PSAs from the 70s. It's both authentically captured and yet genuinely creepy without being all try-hard about it. Take notes, analog horror. But we also find out that this man's dad was the original creator of the Wise Owl character. So we can see how his constant remembrance of this cartoon owl was more so due to his control his dad had over him and because of the abuse he suffered in the past. The episode does have a couple of jokes peppered in throughout, so this episode doesn't get too heavy, but at the same time, these jokes are so dark and gloomy themselves. It's the one time where I don't think the jokes added any levity and just fed into the overall established atmosphere of the episode. It's kinda just depressing all around, but that's why I love it so much. Talk about perfectly capturing an aesthetic. The Devil at Christmas harkens back to those made-for-TV movies, or specials, from the 70s, and it is just bang on. Visually, as you can probably already tell, this looks authentic. So much so, I wouldn't be surprised if they just used older equipment. I mean, they even got those little light trails going on. But also, the audio sounds very analog. But I will admit, that's easier to do in post-production than fully realizing this visual style. I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to emulating old visual styles. It's why I never got into analog horror all too much. Most times, people just slap lazy VHS filters over the footage and call it a day. Like, there's subtleties to this look. So I appreciate the extra time and effort this episode went through to get this visual language down. But also, same compliments could be passed off in regards to the hair, makeup, and costuming. And really just the framing and blocking and acting and okay. Really just every single aspect of this episode captures this 70s style so perfectly. And while I may be a filthy Yogo Bites eating Gen Zer who never really grew up watching said programs, I think the authenticity within this story can't be understated enough. And it still ended up being impactful for me. I love the angle of this also being a director's commentary over the episode. So while the main story is unfolding through this little Christmas special, another one is forming through the commentary. However, I will have to admit that I wish there was a bit more in the commentary department. Sometimes it just feels like they forgot about this narrative thread, but I think it works well for the ending, which I understand some people have a problem with. You see, this entire production we've been watching was actually the recordings of a snuff film, and the director's commentary was actually the director making comments on this while being interrogated in jail. And first off, does a snuff film really need this much story?
I mean, the story is the only thing I watch in more adult films.
Sure, keep telling yourself that, buddy. But some people have a problem with the ending because if they caught this guy making a snuff film, why would they have him watch it and make comments on things like continuity errors? To that extent, I understand. It is a little contrived. But at the same time, I can buy it. It's silly and goofy enough that I can kind of overlook it, for any other reason than just matching the overall tone of the episode. I think this episode just resonated with me overall because it's a change in style and tone. It really stands out from the pack and is somewhat refreshing to see. It's an episode that I will probably revisit this Christmas season. You know, alone and not with my family. You know, I'm a little surprised it took this series 9 seasons to go full sci-fi dystopian on us. But man, does it not disappoint. You could also tell this is a more recent episode because of its more poignant social commentary. It's about the injustices in the world, and the government's role in maintaining the status quo. And every character, while remaining fleshed out, fulfill an archetype to best represent society as a whole. It more than makes its point throughout the runtime, but then that ending rolls around and it is just bleak. It feels a little bit like Black Mirror. And for people that keep asking me to rank Black Mirror, I will, eventually. It's not really a set in stone rule, but I like to rank shows that are kind of complete. I guess I just got lucky with Goosebumps being canceled. All of the characters who question the status quo are taken away and replaced with society-obedient clones. None of these characters in this episode have committed a crime, but it's not about crime at this point. It's about mentalities. You can punch people for crimes. You can't punch people for their thoughts. Until now, I guess. And as this one character so bluntly puts it, we need people like you. People who don't get involved. It is probably one of the more chilling endings to an episode, like those sci-fi films from the 70s that just end on a rather bleak note. Unfortunately, I think this episode would be more relevant for some time to come. Okay, I love this episode for all the reasons that make it divisive amongst the fanbase. You see, while Season 8 was airing, Inside Number 9 kept promoting this one up-and-coming episode called Hold On Tight, which was described as a reboot of the classic British sitcom On the Buses. However, when the night finally arrived, the BBC was like, oh, sorry guys, we have to reschedule this Inside Number 9 episode. Here's a quiz show with Lee Mack instead. I've seen British fans point out that the BBC 2 wouldn't air a game show at 10 p.m. And if the episode truly was delayed, they would just show a rerun instead of a test pilot for a new game show. And all of that kind of broke the illusion for them. I, however, was not aware of this customary. But it's this setup that makes this episode so special. Because, yeah, this episode plays out like a pilot for a brand new game show, and they really commit to it. There is absolutely nothing within this episode's runtime that could possibly tip you off that you're watching an Inside Number 9 episode. It is played so straight. There are subtle things here and there, but they are so subtle. So I could just imagine some random person actually liking this new game show, only to get surprised in the final seconds when this girl blows her mom's head off using telekinesis. Unfortunately, the effect is lessened for me because I knew this was an Inside Number 9 episode all along. In fact, to truly get the full experience, you would have to watch this one live as it originally aired, which, of course, is impossible now, obviously. And in that regard, 95% of this episode really is just a rather basic game show as to not break the illusion. The illusion that is no longer there after the initial airing. But I don't care. I absolutely love shit like this. I may have not gotten the full effects, but I love that Pemberton and Shearsmith were able to pull this off. I get the criticisms, I get the fans were really excited about the original plot of the fake episode, but I still thought it was brilliant regardless. Plodding On is the final episode within the Inside Number 9 series, and it's a really good end. We see Pemberton and Shearsmith actually playing themselves at the Inside Number 9 series rap party. We get a little bit of drama between the two, which seems like it's all good and fun, but maybe came from a real place at a certain point in time. Like, Shearsmith in this episode is working on a new series, and everybody is asking if Pemberton is also working with him on it. I mean, as Shearsmith points out, they have been creative partners for over 25 years, but they also have their own independent creative needs. This, to me, is undoubtedly something they have grappled with over the years. There's clearly no ill will in this sentiment. I can just imagine it gets really annoying constantly being associated with one another. And for the record, the two are obviously presumably on good terms. I mean, after the series ended, the two went on an Inside Number 9 live tour where they reenact certain episodes on stage. In fact, at the time of recording this, they're still doing this up until December of this year. So if you live in the UK and you got some money to spend, go see them live. It's got nothing but positive reviews. This episode also just feels so celebratory. There's a lot of celebrity cameos in this one, and all of which I do not recognize. But all their jokes still land for me personally. Undoubtedly, they're probably funnier if you're familiar with these people. And the whole episode ends with a little On the Buses homage. A little cheeky reference for those fans who really wanted that episode instead of 3x3. After 9 long seasons and about 10 years, this is the perfect send-off. Season 9 continues to pump out nothing but bangers, and while this one has a somewhat similar structure to another episode I haven't talked about yet, it is very much uniquely its own thing. The whole twist of the episode taking place within a coma is nothing new, surprisingly. It's almost a trope at this point, but I can't even knock the episode for that because there are countless little details here and there that make this episode one of the most rewatchable within the series. I'll be here all day if I point them all out. But I love the escape room as the setting, as Pemberton is trying to escape from his coma before they take him off of life support. There's a sentiment amongst fans online that this episode really could have worked as the entire series finale. And you know what? I agree. It speaks volumes to just how good this episode is. And while I loved Plodding On, I do love this one more. I mean, clearly so, it's above it. Also, this one has a happy ending.
Whoa. What the fuck?
Yeah. one of the few times in this series that I can say this one ends on an outright positive note. They probably figured, after tormenting the audience for about 10 years with depressing or bittersweet endings, that we are long overdue for some straight positivity. Maybe that's why people think this should have been the end-all be-all episode. But this is an episode that is fantastic on an initial watch, but simply brilliant on a rewatch. This is the first ever episode to the series, and it's a great introduction to Inside Number 9. Off bat, the show establishes its wit, smart writing, and how truly no taboo subject matter is off topic. Oh, and it also lets you know that this series is gonna have some good twists. It starts off innocently enough, and about how I expected for a British television show to go. You know what I mean. It's loaded with that classic, awkward, uncomfortable, cringy, dry British sense of humor. Which, all things considered, if this episode, or even the series, was nothing but that, I would have been okay. As I've said many times throughout this video, humor is in fact subjective. But to me, I love this shit. And it doesn't get any better than people cramming themselves into a tight little closet while forcing themselves to partake in small talk. Also, to all my UK watchers, is Sardines a real game? Or, I know it's a real game, but is it a popular game? As an American, I just never heard of it, and I can't really see it being that popular, but I don't know. Let me know. But don't worry, if this style of humor isn't to your liking, the story in this episode is really good too. Subtle implications of a tragic past slowly build with the episode, until the very end where it's outright stated but never truly said out loud. And the final revelation of one of the guests not being who he says he is, and is in fact someone from the past seeking revenge, it's masterfully done. Normally when I work on these big ranking videos covering shows with a lot of episodes, I kinda dread watching them, just because it's a lot to cover, and it's never guaranteed if I will like the series. I was a little skeptical going into the show, but let me tell you, any doubts were completely thrown out the window with this episode. To me, this is a better version of Cold Comfort. It's not exactly comparable beyond its presentation format utilizing security footage, but still. This episode is so fantastic for me because thematically, it has shades of Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, which is one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes.
Hey man, when are you gonna rank that show?
Oh, I don't know. The Twilight Zone and X-Files are both like my big white whales for the channel. I love them both so much, and I really want to do a ranking on both of them. The problem though is that they're gonna take forever, and that final video is gonna be long as fuck. But this episode revolves around nosy neighbors and is a warning against herd mentality. These neighbors quickly jump to the conclusion that Shearsmith's character murdered his wife. This isn't quite the case, but it's this very belief they all become absorbed with. So much so that when the illusion is shattered and the wife appears to be alive and well, they take it into their own hands to make their previous beliefs come true, seemingly over a misunderstanding. When you villainify people for so long, and those thoughts rain false, it almost doesn't matter. These characters at the end were looking for any means necessary to justify their beliefs. If it wasn't for the dead dog, it would have been something else entirely. But I think this episode also does a good job with showcasing both sides. Yes, the gossipy, paranoid neighbors are in the wrong, but Shearsmith's character isn't fully in the right. He's standoffish, private, and rude, and doesn't do much for clearing his name when accusations are thrown his way. Now, it's okay to live a private life, and it's okay to not mess with your neighbors like that. But at the same time, there are certain bare minimum social customaries to abide by. They may be dumb in the end of the day, but following this structure really isn't going to impede your lifestyle. And yet, this character doesn't give a shit. I mean, come on, at least bring the Tupperware back, my guy. It's funny though, watching this series, Pemberton and Shearsmith do a really good job at depicting people, and society at large, as being capable of random acts of kindness, while at the same time, depicting them as scared, paranoid, and vitriolic. Both equally valid because, in the end of the day, we're all mixed together. So, this is probably one of my hottest takes within the series. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't an outright hated episode by any means, but if you were to ask an average fan to make a top 10 list, this one's not getting in there. But clearly, not me. I absolutely loved this episode, and perhaps for reasons some may not like it. First and foremost, this episode doesn't have a traditional story structure. There is a plot here, but it's also kind of subdued. Instead, it just focuses on this family day by day throughout the month of December. Kind of like little character vignettes. And this is what I love about this episode so much. The acting and chemistry amongst all these people are not just amazing, but real. I think this is one of the most realized families I've ever seen on television. Apparently, a good chunk of this episode was improvised, which only aids in the magic. The family drama in this episode is also very genuine. There is this soul-crushing scene where this kid is just silently fixing himself a bowl of cereal, while you could hear his parents arguing in the background, and my god, dude. It captures this sort of atmosphere perfectly. But despite all of that, I never felt like this family didn't love each other. It's not a broken home, but a messy one. It's the one where everyone is trying their best despite their circumstances, and that to me is what family is truly all about.
I can't relate. My mom was a microwave.
And what was your dad? Like a refrigerator?
Nah, he was human. He just ran out when I was 5.
Wait, I don't think you know the implications of that. This is probably also one of the only episodes with a super subtle twist ending. In fact, and I know I'm not alone in this one, I thought this episode just didn't have a twist ending for my first viewing. That's how subtle it is. The main conflict in this episode is that the eldest son owes a lot of money to this one loan shark. He steals cash from the mom's secret stash, and that's why the parents fight in the first place. But it's somewhat implied that the mom actually took the family car to run over and subsequently kill this loan shark to leave their family alone. Usually, Inside Number 9 twists are massive bombshells, in-your-face revelations. So I can see why I didn't catch this on the first time around, but I love it nonetheless. If you want to see a genuinely authentic depiction of family on TV, you gotta check this one out. It has so much heart. This episode is one big wild goose chase that will have you so preoccupied with one thing that when the episode finally reveals its hand in the ending, it's like, oh yeah, of course this is what the episode was building up to. It had Children of the Corn energy from the start, but I threw away those assumptions once the central mystery component was introduced. You see, this episode revolves around a new teacher taking over a classroom in the rural countryside, with all the students really missing their previous teacher they called Mr. King. Now, this Mr. King fella is quite the mystery. The staff doesn't have much on file about him, and these students seem obsessed with him. So much so, they don't really listen to their new teacher, causing the new teacher to try and get in contact with him, which just opens up a whole can of worms. And by worms, I mean dick pics. And yes, of course, I have to censor that footage. Even the members only upload. I have to censor that footage. But this to me is such a captivating journey. I feel like we spend the entire time thinking that something is up with that Mr. King fella that we never stop and wonder if there's anything up with the school itself until it's too late. Further aiding in the story is the new teacher. He specifically moved out to the countryside to teach in a smaller school due to his previous mental health problems, which he is currently taking medication for. But since this story is told through his perspective, it also makes the audience wonder if he's an unreliable narrator. There is a lot of elements at play, but as it turns out, every year this classroom gets a new teacher, which they dub, no matter who, Mr. King, and sacrifice them in order to yield a good crop season. Oh, and the dick pics? That's just something the principal does to every incarnation of Mr. King to make sure they are uncircumcised. Mr. King must be as nature intended for the ritual to work. I don't know why the principal keeps the photos though. Besides the point, it's a brilliant episode. This is one of the more celebrated episodes out there, and for good reason. It's a simple yet complex look at the changing nature of friendships. It's every bit as sweet as it is bitter with its portrayal of loss, or more importantly, how we process and come to terms with loss. What starts out as a riveting butting of heads of two friends reuniting via their comedy act eventually devolves into an argumentative scene because of past drama. This would have been great in and of itself, but in classic fashion, the end of the episode twist makes you recontextualize the entire episode. It makes Shearsmith's characterization at the start of being an uptight kind of jerk more understandable, because he's trying to come to terms with his friend's passing. Same goes for his reluctance to go along with these bits. It's hard for him to relive these memories. This is probably one of the best explorations of grief and death I've ever seen on television, while also still remaining pretty funny throughout. But man, this episode absolutely punches you in the gut. And it's simple. It's just two characters in a room. That's it. But I think that simplicity aids in the overall impact. There's not a lot of official Inside Number 9 merch outside of a shirt or hoodie with the logo slapped on it, but there is official merch on this specific episode. That's kind of how beloved Bernie Clifton's dressing room is. I actually bought that shirt. I was kind of hoping it would arrive before I record this video, but nah. And I'm technically recording this video kind of late too, so I held out for a while. It's a classic and a fan favorite for a reason. I can't say enough good things about this one. Zanzibar is an absolute clusterfuck in the best way possible. Every single storyline here is interconnected in some way. The constant shuffling of guests from room to room somehow remains coherent. Every dangling narrative thread somehow gracefully gets interwoven with one another, and the poetry of everything is just the cherry on top. Honestly, this one's a little hard to talk about, because if I bring up one plot point, then I have to talk about every plot point. It's one of those episodes where you just gotta say, it has to be seen to be believed, which may seem dissatisfying to some. So to make it up at some point, I might just have to do an individual video on this episode alone. I mean, it bears that much discussion. Well, maybe not really, but it's a fun one I wouldn't mind covering again in more depth in the future. It's simple and chaotic at the same time, complex but easy to follow, and the entire tone is lighthearted and fun. There may not be a huge twist at the end of this one, but I also feel like constant mini revelations are made throughout, so I wasn't really pining for one in the first place. This is the best Inside Number 9 has to offer in regards to big ensemble casts. It's simply brilliant. Wow, someone put the riddle of Sphinx in his top 5. What a shocker. Yeah, this is one of the most critically acclaimed episodes of Inside Number 9, and for good reason. It's fucking amazing. All the hype and accolades are properly earned with this one. It's so clever and moves so fast, while also letting certain story beats hit their mark properly. It's honestly a little awe-inspiring. It's an episode where if you peel back one layer, there's 5 more layers beneath it. It is just one big snowball rolling down the hill, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It's got crosswords, betrayal, twists, and even incest. That last one isn't a selling point. I just got wrapped up in the moment. Unfortunately, I'm gonna stop talking about this episode to let others experience this one on their own time for the first time. It's got my seal of approval, which I know doesn't mean much. But normally, I do this with the number 1 ranking spot, but I really want to talk about the number 1 ranking spot this time around. But also, if there was any episode of Inside Number 9 to really let you know what this show is all about, or more specifically, what this show is capable of, this is it. Now, I doubt anyone watching this far into the video hasn't seen this show, but if there is, please check this one out. I promise you, you will become a fan. Yeah, this episode completely had my ass the second I found out about the concept of this episode. Essentially, this whole episode sequence of events are told in reverse. You know, like Memento, or that one episode of Creeped Out called Tillybone. And Memento is my favorite Christopher Nolan film, and Tillybone is one of my favorite Creeped Out episodes, if you recall from my own ranking video. That episode would have been my favorite, by the way, if they didn't fuck up the ending, but Once Removed is an absolute masterclass in this style of storytelling. Little details here and there that significantly affect certain plot beats get explored and explained the further we flash back. What's funny too is that the segment in and of itself completely works independently. Like, I would be satisfied with just these little vignettes, but when woven together to be a part of a larger narrative, oh my god, it's so seamless. The standout character for me in this episode, though, is totally Pemberton's realtor character. He is just so desperate and pitiful, it's fantastic. Summarizing, unfortunately once again, would just do this episode a massive disservice. It has to be seen to be believed. A Quiet Night In is a masterpiece. I don't like to throw that terminology around. I think it can oftentimes overhype episodes, causing contrarians to go in with crossed arms and search for little nitpicks. But I stand by my opinion so strongly. I implore any skeptics to go and watch this one for themselves and tell me I'm wrong. And if you say I'm wrong, then you're wrong. Fuck you. But this episode is a masterclass in regards to both storytelling and comedy. And here's the big kicker. There's no dialogue in this episode. Well, technically, there's one line at the very end, but for 29 minutes and 50 seconds out of a 30-minute episode, there is not a line of dialogue uttered. Everything is told and communicated perfectly through visuals alone. This story revolves around these two burglars trying to steal this one painting from this one rich guy whose relationship is on the rocks. So we got two stories here. The marriage crisis I thought was just going to be a little surface level and be more so a goofy backdrop for the setting, but it actually has a surprising amount of layers and history. And need I remind you, all this is communicated with no dialogue. And the burglar story is one of the funniest fucking things I have ever watched. I have never laughed so hard at something so simple in my life. And I think that can summarize the entire episode. It's just a comedy of errors, and I don't typically go in for slapstick all too much, but something about the execution here is perfect. I think it's because it also blends suspense and cartoony hijinks together to create an almost cathartic experience. Like, I will be on the edge of my seat, holding my breath, watching these two sneak around the house, and then something goofy will happen. And it's like, all the tension I have built up in my body just comes out in one big laugh. It's expertly done, and it's only the second episode of the first season. So like, the first episode sold me on the series. This one really hooked me. When I go into a ranking video, I don't do any research in regards to critical reception per episode until after I've seen every episode and have formed my own opinions. That way the ranking has no outside influences and are 100% my own opinion. However, the 12 Days of Christine was the one and only episode I was tipped off about via YouTube comments recommending me this show before I watched it, hailing it as one of the best episodes of television ever. I tried to not let that bias influence my opinion, but I gotta admit, I went into this episode with my arms crossed, huffing and puffing, just ready to call this one overrated. I mean, the best episode of television ever? I gotta prove the people wrong. No way, this is the best episode of television ever. Guys, it's the best episode of television ever. Yeah, this may not be an exciting ending to this list, considering that everybody puts this episode as the best episode of Inside Number 9. I mean, Pemberton has said it's his own personal favorite episode, and Shearsmith... Shearsmith jokes around about hating it, probably because he's barely in the episode.
He's losing it now. Well, that's quite a good one. Oh, I've done that one before. Not as good as Christine. Sheridan Smith one. I wasn't even fucking in the Sheridan Smith one. It's the best one, apparently.
And I'm just following the herd, I guess. But shit, man. Can't beat 'em? Join 'em. Plain and simple, this episode follows Christine as her life flashes before her eyes as she's dying from a car crash. We follow her 1 year at a time, while landing on the next corresponding holiday, and we essentially just see her life. We get to see her fall in love, have a kid, fall out of love, and deal with a father who is not all there anymore, and we just become a part of her life. We become so endeared to this character that by the time it's revealed that she's been dying this entire episode, it is just heartbreaking. Then that final scene happens, with everyone at that dinner table, and surrounded by her loved ones, knowing she's on her way out, she very calmly and graciously thanks everyone for being in her life, and I shed a tear. This one really got me. I haven't cried at a television episode, let alone movie, book, or song, since I was in middle school. But this was the first thing in any form of fictional medium to just get me like that. And I know I'm not alone. Plenty of people across the internet have expressed how this one made them cry. But they have also expressed how this episode has helped them deal with the loss of a loved one, and I can totally see why. I know Shearsmith isn't fond of this one because, to him, it doesn't feel like an Inside Number 9 episode, specifically citing the lack of humor as the main problem. And yeah, this is probably one of the most deprived humor episodes, but to me, it doesn't need it. I know the show works best when it can balance something serious or horrific with comedy, and that's how I prefer it normally, but this episode is a true testament, proving that it can break the mold and still stand tall regardless. I don't believe in perfection, but the 12 Days of Christine is about as close to perfection as you can get. So that was Inside Number 9, an amazing series I implore all of you to check out if you haven't already. Or even if you have, fuck it, watch it again. It's great. This is probably one of the hardest times I had actually ranking all the episodes just because of the sheer quality of all of them. I mean, I was just constantly shuffling around episodes. I couldn't make up my mind. And this is like one of the only few series where you could name any episode and say that's your favorite episode, and I would say, yeah, I could see it. Except for Wuthering Heist. That's the only episode I just legitimately don't like. Anyways, shout out to the channel members for directly supporting me. If you want your name in the credits and a bunch of other perks, you can become a channel member today. Link will be in the description for mobile users. These longer videos just take a lot out of me, but thankfully next time we'll be back with a significantly shorter series. But until then,
Thanks for watching, you wankers.